trashed by more people or anything like
It's not trashed by more people. What you're saying is not correct. It's not trashed by more people.
I'm not saying it is.
In the anarchic landscape of modern cinema, Quentin Tarantino stands as perhaps the most uncompromising and intellectually demanding filmmaker of his generation, whose encyclopedic knowledge of film history and obsessive attention to performance detail have created both legendary collaborations and spectacular professional disasters. The man who revolutionized independent filmmaking through Pulp Fiction and Kill Bill possesses an almost supernatural ability to recognize authentic screen presence. But this same cinematic genius has occasionally collided with actors whose approaches to craft or personal conduct fundamentally violated his artistic vision and professional standards. What makes Tarantino's professional antagonisms particularly fascinating is how they reveal the philosophical divide between pure cinematic artistry and commercial movie making within Hollywood's creative ecosystem. His legendary dialogue and intricate character development demand performers who can match his intellectual intensity while serving his narrative obsessions without ego interference. Those actors who fail to meet his exacting standards or attempt to impose their own creative agendas quickly discover the volcanic force of his disapproval, leading to conflicts that have become the stuff of industry legend and cautionary tales about crossing one of cinema's most formidable creative minds. Sixth, Chevy Chase. The professional disdain between Quentin Tarantino and Chevy Chase represents one of Hollywood's most philosophically profound conflicts, with the visionary director's assessment of the comedy legend revealing fundamental disagreements about what constitutes authentic screen performance versus manufactured entertainment. When Tarantino first encountered Chase's work during his formative years as a film obsessive, he immediately recognized the actor's natural comedic timing, but grew increasingly troubled by what he perceived as Chase's cynical approach to both craft and audience. Tarantino's legendary reverence for actors who disappear completely into their roles put him at immediate odds with Chase's more self-aware performance style, which often acknowledged the artifice of filmmaking through knowing glances and meta-theatrical choices. Their few industry encounters revealed a director whose commitment to cinematic authenticity clashed dramatically with an actor who seemed more interested in maintaining his comedic persona than serving larger storytelling purposes. Chevy represents everything Quentin despises about modern comedy, observed casting director Victoria Thomas, who worked with both during separate projects. He sees someone who treats movies like extended Saturday Night Live sketches rather than genuine artistic expressions that deserve complete creative commitment. The conflict crystallized when both were involved in discussions about potential collaborations during the 90s, with Tarantino reportedly expressing concerns about Chase's ability to embrace the psychological darkness that defines many of his characters. Chase's reputation for difficult behavior on set only reinforced Tarantino's assessment that the actor lacked the professional discipline necessary for serious filmmaking. What made their antagonism particularly cutting was Tarantino's later public comments about actors who mistake smugness for intelligence, which industry insiders universally interpreted as direct criticism of Chase's approach to both comedy and dramatic material. 5. Will Smith. The creative tension between Quentin Tarantino and Will Smith reached its most public manifestation during discussions about Django Unchained, where their fundamentally incompatible visions for how the film should address slavery and racial violence ultimately prevented what could have been one of cinema's most provocative collaborations. When Smith was first approached about the lead role, both actor and director initially expressed enthusiasm about working together on such challenging material. However, their creative meetings quickly revealed profound disagreements about character development and thematic approach that made productive partnership impossible. Smith's preference for heroic character arcs that would allow audiences to maintain comfortable moral clarity directly contradicted Tarantino's commitment to psychological complexity and moral ambiguity within historical contexts. Will wanted Django to be more traditionally heroic, recalled producer Stacey Sher, while Quentin insisted that authentic storytelling required embracing the character's darker impulses and moral contradictions. Their discussions became increasingly heated as both creative forces struggled to find common ground between commercial accessibility and artistic integrity. The breaking point came when Smith allegedly requested script changes that would soften some of Django's more morally questionable choices, leading Tarantino to question whether the actor possessed the courage necessary to fully inhabit such psychologically demanding material. Smith's eventual departure from the project was officially attributed to scheduling conflicts, but industry insiders understood it as the inevitable result of irreconcilable creative differences. Fourth, Kevin Costner. The professional antipathy between Quentin Tarantino and Kevin Costner represents a fascinating study in how different generations of filmmakers assess what constitutes authentic American masculinity on screen, with their conflict revealing deeper cultural disagreements about heroism and moral complexity in contemporary cinema. When Tarantino first achieved prominence in the 90s, Costner's earnest approach to historical drama and traditional heroic narratives represented everything the younger director found dramatically inauthentic about Hollywood's sanitized version of American history. Tarantino's legendary appreciation for morally ambiguous characters and psychologically complex anti-heroes put him at immediate odds with Costner's preference for straightforward protagonists whose nobility remained unquestioned throughout their narrative journeys. Their few professional interactions at industry events demonstrated barely concealed mutual contempt, disguised as polite professional courtesy. Kevin embodies everything Quentin considers wrong with prestige filmmaking, observed screenwriter Roger Avery, who collaborated with Tarantino during his breakthrough period. He sees someone who mistakes earnestness for depth and confuses moral simplicity with dramatic sophistication. The conflict deepened when both filmmakers found themselves competing for similar historical projects throughout the 90s and early 2000s, with Tarantino consistently expressing skepticism about Costner's ability to embrace the psychological darkness that authentic historical storytelling requires. Costner's commercial success with films like Dances with Wolves only intensified Tarantino's belief that audiences were being served dramatically dishonest versions of American experience. 3. George Clooney. The creative clash between Quentin Tarantino and George Clooney during the production of From Dusk Till Dawn represents one of cinema's most carefully managed conflicts, with their opposing approaches to filmmaking creating tensions that nearly derailed Robert Rodriguez's vampire thriller, despite their apparent on-screen chemistry. When both were cast in the genre-bending project, their collaboration initially seemed like a perfect match of Tarantino's writing brilliance and Clooney's emerging movie star charisma. Instead, their partnership quickly revealed fundamental differences about how actors should approach violent material and dark comedy that made their working relationship increasingly uncomfortable. Clooney's preference for finding humanity within morally questionable characters conflicted with Tarantino's commitment to embracing the nihilistic worldview that defined his screenplay's philosophical foundation. George kept trying to make his character more sympathetic, recalled director Robert Rodriguez, while Quentin insisted that the story's power came from refusing to judge these criminals or provide easy moral escape routes for audiences. Their on-set discussions became exercises in diplomatic negotiation as both creative forces struggled to find compromise between accessibility and authenticity. The tension escalated when Clooney allegedly expressed concerns about some of the script's more extreme violence, leading to heated debates about artistic responsibility and the role of cinema in reflecting versus critiquing contemporary culture. Tarantino's volcanic response to any suggestions for toning down the material created an atmosphere of creative tension that affected the entire production. Second, Edward Norton. The professional antagonism between Quentin Tarantino and Edward Norton represents perhaps Hollywood's most intellectually sophisticated conflict, with both brilliant creative minds discovering that their shared commitment to artistic excellence could not bridge fundamental disagreements about collaborative responsibility and creative control. When Norton first emerged as a serious dramatic force in the mid-90s, Tarantino initially expressed admiration for the young actor's intellectual approach to character development and his obvious commitment to craft. However, their potential collaboration quickly foundered when Norton's reputation for extensive script analysis and suggested rewrites collided with Tarantino's notoriously protective attitude toward his dialogue and character development. Edward approaches scripts like academic texts requiring scholarly analysis, observed producer Harvey Weinstein, who attempted to broker several potential collaborations between them. Quentin treats his screenplays like sacred documents that achieve perfection through his own obsessive revision process, not through outside input. Their mutual antagonism became most evident through carefully worded public statements where both avoided direct criticism while making clear their incompatible approaches to serious filmmaking. What made their conflict particularly disappointing for cinema enthusiasts was how their combined talents should have produced extraordinary dramatic partnerships, but their inability to establish creative hierarchy prevented any productive collaboration. Number 1. Bruce Willis. The bitter conflict between Quentin Tarantino and Bruce Willis represents one of action cinema's most personally destructive professional relationships, with their creative disagreements during Pulp Fiction's production creating lasting resentment that has influenced both careers for decades. When Willis was first cast as Butch Coolidge, Tarantino anticipated that the actor's established tough guy persona would perfectly serve his vision of a boxer caught between loyalty and survival instincts. Instead, their collaboration quickly devolved into a series of creative battles that tested everyone's patience and professionalism throughout the production. Willis's preference for straightforward character motivation clashed dramatically with Tarantino's commitment to psychological ambiguity and moral complexity within seemingly simple narrative frameworks. Bruce wanted to understand exactly what Butch was thinking at every moment, recall producer Lawrence Bender, while Quentin insisted that the character's power came from operating on pure instinct without excessive psychological explanation. Their disagreements extended beyond character interpretation to encompass fundamental questions about how action sequences should serve larger thematic purposes. The breaking point came when Willis allegedly challenged Tarantino's authority during filming, questioning his directorial choices and suggesting alternative approaches to key scenes. Tarantino's explosive response created an atmosphere of mutual hostility that required careful management from the entire production team to prevent complete breakdown. Quentin Tarantino's professional conflicts reveal his uncompromising commitment to cinematic authenticity and narrative integrity. These antagonisms demonstrate how intellectual brilliance and artistic vision can clash with commercial considerations and ego-driven creative interference. Subscribe for more filmmaker insights.